So I saw this article by IGN yesterday, and yes, surprisingly, IGN actually did some actual good reporting and some actual good journalists. I know, shocking, guys. Shocking that IGN has actually done some reporting, but it came out yesterday that supposedly Tencent has now been designated as a Chinese military company by the US Department of Defense. That's right, this came out from Bloomberg. Unfortunately, I can't look at the Bloomberg article altogether because they are one of those, publishing articles now that where you have to pay for it in order to see the entire article. So we're just going to go ahead and look at like parts of the IGN article, and then we're going to get into it even further as well, because there was updates that came out today, because this is all from yesterday. So right here it says US Department of Defense has classified Tencent, a major investor in several big video game companies, as a Chinese military company. Report from Bloomberg states that Tencent alongside battery maker CATL have been added to the list that classifies them as Chinese military companies. The designation itself does not carry any legal consequences such as sanctions, but inclusion on this list is not ideal for companies looking to conduct business in the United States. Obviously not. And from what I have heard as well, if you go ahead and you look at this, this is Tencent stock holdings. So as you can see, when this was announced, their stocks actually dropped very significantly. So I'm just going to show you the graph here, but I'm going to read it out like while I'm skimming over it. It dropped from 408 HKD and then it dropped to 381. So that is obviously a decent drop in stocks. It obviously came back up a little bit, but even since then, as you can see from the graph, it's slowly just been going a little bit downhill. Now, I'm not going to say at all that it's going to, keep declining and keep going downhill. I definitely think that it's going to, at some point go back up, because Tencent is a massive company. I mean, at this point in time, I think they are the most valuable stock holding company when it comes to in the video game industry, considering they own so many big companies such as Riot Games and Triple G. And it was also both a Tencent spokesperson, also a CATL spokesperson as well, who came out and spoke to The Verge. I don't know why The Verge out of every publication, but that doesn't really matter. They came out and both spoke to them in a recent statement, saying that we are not a military company or supplier. Unlike sanctions or export controls, this listing has no impact on our business. We will nonetheless work with the Department of Defense to address any misunderstandings. And then they also added as well that CATL is not engaged in any military-related activities. Now, you're probably asking me, Donnie, why the hell is the US Department going ahead and doing this? Now, honestly, to give you an actual reason, I really don't know. I mean, I think it's stupid, but does this come as a surprise to me? No. No, I am not surprised whatsoever, especially since we've seen in the past year when it's come to, the US wanting to ban TikTok as well. And when I've made videos about that as well, I've even mentioned companies like Tencent, where I've said, man, I'm really surprised that the US is going ahead and trying to ban TikTok, but then they're leaving companies like Tencent alone. I'm really surprised that they haven't touched Tencent or even done anything to, whether it's try to ban them or put them on any list like they have now. So the fact that I've seen this and they're actually coming out and blacklisting Tencent, no, not one part of me is surprised with this whatsoever. But we also have a development in this as well, where today it came out that the world's biggest game publisher, Tencent, threatened to sue the US government for listing them as a Chinese military government. That's right. Tencent has actually come out and they have made a statement themselves, and we are going to actually read through that statement, where they are going to pretty much threaten to sue the US government. So this right here is this voluntary announcement, where it says this announcement is made by Tencent Holdings, blah, blah, blah. The company noted that the US Department of Defense has scheduled to publish the notice of availability of designation of Chinese military companies on the 7th of January 2025. Pursuant to the notice, the Deputy Secretary of Defense has included the company into the listing Chinese military companies, the CMC list. The full text of this notice can be found at this link right here. As the company is neither a Chinese military company nor a military civil fusion contributor to the Chinese defense industrial base, it believes that this inclusion in the CMC list is a mistake. Unlike other lists maintained by the US government for the sanctions or export control measures, inclusion in the CMC list relates only to US defense procurement, which does not affect the business of the group. The CMC list is also distinct from the non SDN Chinese Military Industrial Complex list maintained by the US Office of Foreign Assets Control, and inclusion in the CMC list will not be prohibited any persons other than the Department of Defense from business dealings with the company, including transacting in the securities of the company. The company intends to initiate a reconsideration process to correct this mistake. During the process, it will engage in discussion with the US Department of Defense to resolve any misunderstanding, and if necessary, will undertake legal proceedings to remove the company from the CMC. The company will make further announcements as when appropriate. So that first, they are not going to be directly suing the US government. They will look to work with them, but obviously if the US government, or the US defense, turns around and says, hey, nah, we're leaving you on this list, don't even try it, and then all of a sudden, that's when Tencent's going to go ahead and try to sue the US government. And you might be thinking this is a far stretch, but actually, in this article where I got the second headline from, it was made by Rock? It was made by Rock Paper Shotgun, which is a US another gaming publication website, and they actually wrote at the end of their article saying that if it comes to a lawsuit, Tencent won't be the first Chinese company to go to court over their inclusion in the US federal government's list of military-civil fusions, as reported by Reuters. Drone maker DJI and leader maker Hesay Technologies sued the Pentagon last year over the designations, although that is still on the list for the moment, and I don't know how that case itself is going. It's probably still ongoing to this very point, considering that they are on that list. But to get into it more now, I think that this is completely stupid. But at first you might be wondering, Donnie, what is why would they go ahead and put, this company on the list? Is there any reason for why they would go ahead and put them on the list? Does Tencent actually have any links when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party? Well, to a certain extent, yes and no, because when it comes to every single company that's owned in China and that's functioning in China, from what I know, every single Chinese company must have a representative of the CCP inside that company. It's not like they want to have that person in there. It's more of they must have that person in there to pretty much make sure that they aren't doing anything that goes against the CCP, which is also why Tencent has been in controversies in the past when it comes to censorship. That's not because of their own doing, pretty much. If Tencent had it their way, they probably wouldn't go ahead and censor a whole load of things. They probably wouldn't go ahead and get caught up in controversies when it comes to censorship. But they themselves have to, because they have this representative of the CCP in their company, mainly to do things like censorship in their own country. That's what it comes down to. A lot of them, it's not like they're trying to scab this, data from the US players or whatever it may be. No, it's completely BS. And they own massive companies that are outside China as well. It's not like Tencent's only workings are just within China. They own Riot Games since 2011. Riot Games operates out of California. They own Triple G, which is the company that makes Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2. They operate out of New Zealand, and they're just a publication. That's all it is. So the fact that the US defense is going ahead and pretty much trying to blacklist Tencent is completely ridiculous. And I think that Tencent has every right to fight against this and to go ahead and if the US defense turns around and says, no, we're not going to take you off this list, then I think they have every right to sue them. And I hope they come out on the big end. And you might be saying that man, that's going to be hard considering that, they're going to be suing the government altogether. Suing the Pentagon. Damn, the US government has a lot of money. Well, so does Tencent. Like I said, they're the biggest publication in the world right now when it comes to video games. They own some of the biggest companies. And they're the companies that they own, like I already mentioned, when it comes to Riot Games and Triple G, these companies make some of the biggest games in the world. Path of Exile 2 is huge. And I mean, Riot Games, League of Legends, and Valorant, I mean, those games just speak for themselves. I don't even need to get into how big of games that those two are. So they have a lot of money to be able to put into this lawsuit to be able to get it off. And these reports say is that yes, it doesn't really have any effect to the way that these companies operate, but to go ahead and be on this list, obviously it can make some further companies, it can be hard to trade within the US, especially with the recent rumors that Ubisoft is starting to go under, and Tencent doesn't have a little bit of holdings in Ubisoft. And there's also been rumors around the fact that Tencent might go ahead, and if, you know, Ubisoft looks to sell majority of their company, that Tencent might just go ahead and outright buy Ubisoft. To me, at least from what I am reading, that it might make it harder for Tencent to go ahead and like buy a company like Ubisoft. Ubisoft is in France, so yes, it really like affect them that much, but it's just more of like an example. So I know it's probably a terrible example, like I said, because Ubisoft is in France and not in the US. But say just like hypothetically, if they were in the US, that's just the only example I can really think of from the top of my head, because that's like the biggest like rumor that's when it comes to like, you know, tradings with Tencent that's been going on. But say like Ubisoft operated in America, it would make them harder to go ahead and acquire that and make like a whole load of business decisions in the US. And who knows, because, you know, the US and France do have like some relations, and, you know, when it comes to NATO and stuff like that, even though that, you know, they are only blacklisted when it comes to the US Defense Force, it might still make it harder for them to go ahead and, you know, make these trades in other countries that are allies with America as well. Like, that could have a ripple effect, not just in the US, but also to other countries. Like, who knows? Who knows? But I definitely think that this is completely stupid. It's BS that the US government has gone ahead and do something like this. And I hope that, you know what, that it just gets reverted. I really think that it should, but who knows? The US government, I feel like when it comes to, you know, China, especially when we look at TikTok itself, like, yes, they're reverting it, and, well, not really reverting it, but they're like putting a pause on it at the moment. But they have been completely stupid when it comes to anything that's got to do with China in the past. But I'd definitely like to hear what you guys have to think about all this down below. That's going to be it from me. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Peace out.